Welcome back.
Showtime.
Showtime. Remember, welcome back, Carter.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Miss Wilsey does too. Did you, Dr. Bedell?
Welcome
I
back.
get ready to sing it.
No. No, sir.
No? Okay. That's fair.
Dr. Bell, for that.
All right, it looks like I may have, checking to see, have all my colleagues joined back here? And hopefully we have them all. So it is now 6:30 p.m. So with this, the regular meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors is now called to order. The secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Here,
Mr. Abarca,
Present.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr.
Pesky
Hogan,
mute button here.
Dr. Jones,
Present.
Mr. Wasserstrom, Ms.
I'm
Wolfson.
here.
Thank you.
I'm here too.
Thank you, Ms. Wolfson.
thank you, everyone. The first item on our agenda, the first item is to approve the agenda. And before we take that motion, the administration has asked the board to give consideration to move the policy monitoring report policy 1.3 to our December 9th meeting. So and the board had been notified of this change, this requested change. So at this time, it would be in order to receive a motion for acceptance of the agenda with the, but tabling 1.3 presentation to December 9th.
So moved. Oh, second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote.
Ms. Manser,
We can barely hear you, June.
No,
Ms.
you're not,
Manser,
yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfson.
Yes.
Thank you. The agenda is approved. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This evening, we have no individuals who have signed up for public comment. So we will be able to move on from that item. Just a reminder to the community, we have at each business meeting of every month, we have up to 10 slots available for public comment, and members of the public can sign up until 6:30 p.m. on that day of the meeting. So we want to make sure everyone is aware that that is an opportunity, and we will allow people to sign up until the start of the meeting. So for the next item on the agenda, we have the report of the District Advisory Council, and I believe we have Mr. Rochester with us today. Mr. Rochester, are you with us now? June, are you aware if Mr. Rochester has joined?
I do not see him on the list of participants.
Okay. Thank you, and we will look forward to having a report of the DAC at the next upcoming meeting. The next item on the agenda tonight is the presentation of the evening's revenue and expenditure report. So for that, the chair recognizes Board Treasurer Manny Abarca.
All right, good evening, everyone. Let's see if we can get the presentation uploaded here on our screens. Thank you, our wonderful IT team. So looking first at the summary of revenues, expenditures, and fund balance page, want to turn your attention to the overall fund balance summary that indicates a higher operating fund balance than last year at this time, as shown in the first two columns. This is due to an increase in revenues, which we'll review in the coming pages. Moving on to the next page. Looking at local revenues, we continue to trail behind last year at this time, mostly due to the delinquent tax collection and the previous sale of 1211 McGee, shown on line 5651. If we can jump to the next one. So you'll see this is where the 5651 sale of other property was showing the variance there. Moving on to the next page, state revenues. State revenues are actually on track with last year at this point. Taking a look at our federal revenues are up by $11 million as compared to this time last year, due primarily to CARES Act funding of $3.3 million, IDEA special education reimbursement of $2.9 million. This is a timing difference in the 2 years. The Title I, $4 million, again, a timing difference on when the funds were claimed, and the Child Nutrition Services revenues that continue to run behind last year due to changes in programs that were affected by COVID. So moving on to the next page of salaries and benefits. Salaries and benefits are aligned to last year generally, although higher due to increased compensation and costs of benefits. Looking at our next couple pages here, purchase services are running behind last year due mostly to the reduced service costs as school has become virtual. You toggle to the next page just so that you can take a look at the rest of that purchase services component. Moving on to supplies. Supplies are $1.3 million higher than last year, due again to the IT costs related to school going to virtual. Taking a look at the next slide. So we've got, actually, I think this is capital outlays, expenditures. Okay. So we should be on the next one, I think. Oh, I think I missed a slide. So yeah, there we go. Thanks. One more forward. Okay, we're good. Sorry. So net revenue expenditures is less than last year at this time and on track for budget. Next month, we will provide you an update compared to the current year's budget to see how that is tracking with a greater detail. On the last page, our investments report shows that we have maturities on pay dates through January mostly, and adequate cash balances to get through the coming months until January when local property tax revenues begin coming in again. So with that, I conclude my report.
Apologize. Thank you, Mr. Barca. Are there any questions on this report? Hearing none, we'll go on to the next item. I would like to invite my colleagues who chair ad hoc committees. I first want to recognize Government Relations Committee Chair Jennifer Wolfsey to present and discuss the legislative priorities.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tonight is the night that we get to review and hopefully adopt our 2021 legislative priorities. I'm fortunate enough to chair this committee, but I am joined by my colleagues Rita Cortez and Mark Wasserstrom, along with members of the administration. In an interest of time, because we have a lot on our plate, I won't go through everybody that attends, But what I do want to say is that this committee meets fairly regularly. And this is where we take some of our business offline, but we also are very collaborative with the administration. And one of those ways is through the drafting of legislative priorities every year. And these are usually priorities focused at the state level. So tonight, I would like to present, and June, thank you. The 4 priorities that we are recommending, that the Government Relations Committee is recommending as our final priorities for 2021. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. The process that's been involved with this is a couple months ago, we actually reviewed our last year's priorities, talked about them, discussed what we might want to bring forward this year and what we might want to add. We then presented those in draft form to the board and to the public, I believe at our last meeting, asking for feedback. And we've had a couple of times where we've had some feedback requests. So these are they're in draft form, but they're ready for adoption. So the first one is that we will support legislation that provides adequate funding for the social, hold on one second, and emotional needs of underserved communities, particularly those most impacted by living in neighborhoods with increasing rates of COVID-19, violent crime, and the digital divide. Could you move to the next slide, please, June? The other second priority is to support legislation and funding designed to provide for compensation for Missouri public school teachers that is competitive, livable, and differentiated. Next slide, please. The third one is to support legislation and the enforcement of statutes to provide full equitable treatment and public education accountability, flexibility, and resource distribution in charter counties. And next slide, please. The fourth priority is to support legislation that moves the Kansas City public schools system under the Hancock Amendment to assure protections for property owners and public schools from sudden and significant changes in assessed valuation. Nope, I'm good. That's my last slide. So at this point, I'd like to, I guess, recommend the approval of these 4 priorities for 2021 legislative session.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Wolfsey. Before we receive a motion, are there any final questions from board members regarding any of those items? I know we have reviewed these through several meetings to date.
I
Mr.
just
Hogan?
wanted,
Oh, and Ms. Cortez, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Cortez.
Go ahead, Ms. Cortez.
really, all I wanted, mine was very brief. I want to thank Ms. Wolfsey for her leadership in kind of navigating in partnership with the administration to these 4 priorities. I think, you know, we've got our challenges cut out in Jeff City, and I really appreciate the way she's approached this.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, so you stole my thunder. I was gonna thank you, Ms. Wolfsey, for your leadership in this space. I know this is an area where'd you go? Oh, there you are. Where you're very passionate, and that you have a lot of experience in advocating on behalf of not just Kansas City's public schools and our kids, but in other areas that are important to the growth of this city in an equitable way. So thank you, as well as your fellow committee members for this. One point on the tweaks that I thought were really interesting and awesome is how you guys made it relevant for today, right? So the emphasis on telehealth and the emotional and social supports area, and then on COVID-19 and where we are with that. So, you know, thinking about not just pushing legislation through, but legislation that is current and relevant to the needs that our communities face. So thanks for your leadership in this area.
Thank you. So it would now be in order to receive a motion to approve the legislative priorities as presented.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, the secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones, Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. The legislative priorities are approved. Ms. Wolfsey, is there any final update for the community regarding next steps?
Yes, thank you for asking. We are going to be hosting our legislative breakfast, which is something we've done for the last, I want to say 3 or 4 years now. We have a focus now, though, where we bring and invite our community partners to that. And so we will be hosting that on December 4th at the early time of 8 a.m. and it will be virtual this year. So I just want to let the public know about that as well.
Thank you. I want to turn to, we have 2 other committee leaders. So Dr. Jones, do you have any updates that you would like to provide to the community today?
No, I don't, Madam Chair. Sorry, I had to step away, but no, we don't have any updates right now. We expect that we will have some after tomorrow's meeting. So we'll bring those updates to our next meeting.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Cortez, you are chairing a recently established committee. Would you provide a brief overview of what that committee is?
Yes, and I want to thank my colleagues and the administration for putting this committee in place. We held our first meeting of the Finance Committee yesterday, actually in closed session, to receive some components of the audit that will be presented on December 9th. But this committee was formed really to give the board and the administration a meeting point to review, to work together on a series of finance-related items, including defining and recommending what metrics we'll consistently use and report to the board. I want to thank Dr. Bedell and Ms. Quinley for supporting this effort, and Ms. Wolfsey and Mr. Abarca for agreeing to serve on the committee. We anticipate our first full meeting will take place in early December, and that obviously will be noticed to the public, but we have our work ahead of us.
Apologies. Thank you so much, and thank you for leading this committee. That concludes the ad hoc committee updates. So Dr. Bedell, at this point, I'm ready to turn it to you. So I'd like to hand the agenda over to you now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to start off by saying good evening to everybody who's participating today, our community members who are listening in. Under the superintendent's report, we have several important updates that we have to provide to you all tonight. We often start off with our video highlight, which will focus on student voice, but then we will move into our COVID-19 update and where we are as a school district with our school reopening plans. And then we will have our critical board policy presentation on 1.1 around student and academic performance. As you've heard at the beginning of the board meeting, we will move 1.3, which is on service learning, social and emotional health and well-being of our students. That will take place on December 9th because we do have a pretty lengthy presentation for 1.1 that's pretty comprehensive. And so at this time, let's get started with our video highlight. If we can get that up and running, IT.
They will teach you anything, even if that's not their subject. After school, you can always go to them and ask, oh, can you help me on this problem? I really don't understand it. And if you're feeling down, I'll always be here. And there's other people because there's a lot of people that are nice, even if they're not in your grade, they'll still talk to you.
There's so much diversity, and even though there's a lot of diversity, everyone is kind to each other. And the teachers are still kind to us too.
Well, one of my vice principal helped me do math. I didn't used to know really math. she told me that if I try math hard, I'll get it. And then I told her I can't. She said I will, and then I tried to cry it out. I told her I can't. And she said she teach me. I listened to her. I told her I can't, and then she said you can do this. And then I said okay. And then I tried it, and it was really fun. I really like math now. I'm trying to be a math teacher. I want to be a tutor.
Teachers, they help us to be a good student because they can help you through life and they can teach you lots of things.
I was struggling with one of my math work, and I told my teacher about it. She was like, "You don't give up." And then I tried. It was kind of hard, so I went to, and then the teacher made a morning meeting where we go to her meeting, and she helped us out with whatever we need help with.
I'll tell them to try something they never do. I'll prove them the school is better for them, just for the future. I want them to see how it is about school. I want them to feel good about school.
It's a really amazing school, and it's probably the best school that anyone would go to.
My teacher is Miss Cunningham, and one thing that I like about Miss Cunningham is that she helps me. She helps me through math, even though I'm really hard at it, and she helps me through everything that I've been through this week.
What surprised me the most about Gladstone Elementary School out of the other school I went to is everyone. Everyone helps people when they're down. The teachers help you. Some of my other school, they didn't do that. The principal helps. They make good subjects. They even made day where you they even made culture day. Every school celebrates that, but Gladstone is different. It's like a dream country. It's like a dream come true here at the school.
The teachers will always help you no matter what. Doesn't matter if it's not their subject. They will teach you after school if the other teacher's not there for you. Whittier Elementary, you see all these nice people and really they communicate with you and teach you things that you haven't learned. You will learn a lot in a day here. And then we might go over it, but that's the best part for you can know everything about it, so we'll go over it, and if you don't understand it, we'll go over it again.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Waito and team for putting that together. It's important that we make sure that our community and our board have an opportunity to just listen to what our students are saying and how they feel about how they're being served in this school district. And, we have a lot of work to do. And before I get into this COVID-19 update, it's probably a great opportunity for me to express to this board and to this community how proud I am of our teachers. I've been in a lot of schools since we've gone into this pandemic. I've been around a lot of students, and as you all know, we brought back our high minute students last week, and I had an opportunity to almost visit probably 70% of our classes so far. And just thinking about what these teachers have had to go through as they are pivoting and trying to learn a new pedagogical way of delivering teaching and learning to our students. And many of them shared some of their stories that where they've gone above and beyond to the point where teachers are going and they're knocking on doors. They are in the driveway supporting our kids. It hurts me, and it's very disheartening when you see some of the insensitive text or Facebook posts or Twitter posts where people are making accusations that teachers are just home collecting paychecks or that educators don't want to be in front of kids. I've gone and I've visited classrooms where I've had teachers break down crying in front of me for the mere fact that they feel like they're not able to reach their kids at the level that they want to reach their kids at because they may be old school teachers. They may be teachers that have feel like I can really read the emotion of my kids when I'm in front of them. These people care. And, I think it's important for me as a superintendent to defend our workforce because these people are going far above and beyond. And the truth is they want to be back, right? But they want to be back in a safe manner. And my job is to make sure that I'm doing everything in my power to make that happen in a very methodical, intentional manner, but to also not put us in a situation where we're going back and forth and we're all over the place and we don't have any type of cohesion. So that's what this COVID-19 update is going to focus on. And when I get through with this presentation, I recognize this, and I was sharing this with several board members. I want our community to know that, nobody's wrong in how they feel right now. I mean, at the end of the day, the people who want kids back in school, you're absolutely right. The people who don't want to have kids in school, you're absolutely right. Right. And I think at the end of the day, whatever decision our district have to make, we're going to try to do everything in our power to stick to the plan that we put out back in August, to look at our data, to follow what the trends are telling us we need to do, and to do it in a safe manner. And I think that, we recognize that people aren't going to be happy. 50% of people aren't going to be happy, whichever way we go. But as long as we can articulate and give you the explanation and the context as to why we're making decisions we're making, I think ultimately people will see in the long term that we're doing what's in the best interest of this community. So let's get the slides up and going here. We had it up and it just dropped off. So let's move on to the next slide. So as you know, we talked about not wanting to be in a scenario where our school district is falling into some of what some of our colleagues are dealing with across the metro and across the state. I shared with you at our last update what was happening in Boston and what was happening nationally in several other cities where school districts had gotten up and were up and running and they had to shut down. You just heard about New York City having to go back into shutdown mode. You've heard there are school districts on here, Lee Summit, what's happening out there, what's happening in Park Hill, a number of school districts that are now having to go back into virtual. And it's not because of the students, it's because of the adults. The biggest issue that we run into with this is the more adults that you have inside of your facilities, the more likely you're going to run into being in a scenario where you're going to have large numbers of people that would have to go into quarantine. And so we have been very intentional in this school district to minimize the amount of people that are in our central office facilities, the amount of people that are inside of our schools, and try to reduce it. It's inevitable. You're going to have cases that do pop up, but I think as a school district, the more proactive we can be, the better off we will be with the level of consistency and fluency working with our kids. Next slide. So we have our dashboard, and I don't know if you guys can go to it. I just wanted to show everybody what our live data dashboard looks like. Is there any way we can go to that from here? Or if not, we'll continue to move forward. So if you go to our website, our data dashboard will provide you with an update on what information we've received from the health departments. Take and scroll over the positive rates within KCPS zip codes. Can you do that for me, Joe, or whoever's controlling this? And I feel like we had the mouse here and now I don't see it. Can you guys show our community what it looks like? Well, here's what we will do. If you go over to our dashboard on the website, you can look and you can put the mouse on here and it will give you current update on where we are by zip code. It will also give you our where we are in terms of the graph with our modes that we're in. We're currently in a red mode, which means that the district will continue to remain in a virtual platform. And all of this aligns directly with the KCPS gating criteria. But we wanted to make sure that this was interactive. So as we get the updates every 2 weeks, we constantly update this, and we will continue to do so. Next slide. So when you think about where we were a couple of weeks ago, at the end of September going into October, there were 27 positive COVID cases between 11 and 19-year-olds. And the last 2 weeks, we've seen an increase of 149 positive COVID cases between 10 to 19-year-olds. And a lot of that is happening with the data that we're getting from the health department that's being reported from various school districts. So that age range is an age range that we do have concerns with. And as we've stated before, none of this tends to happen inside of the schools. This is happening in the community, and then it gets brought into our schools. And most of your school districts have the protective measures in place. But I think that at the end of the day, if there's not the discipline in the community, these numbers are going to continue to increase. And I think it's the reason why the district was very intentional that we would only focus on several sections of our early childhood students. We've had our early childhood center up and running since September. And we've had one case, I believe, in there with one adult, not a student. And then, but it's only a few adults in the building. And the same is happening now with our high minute students, where we have very few staff members in the buildings, which we believe will not allow for us to run into some of the significant issues that we're dealing with across the metro and some of our other systems. Next slide. This is our gating criteria. And as we've stated to you all, we do plan to continue to adhere to our gating criteria. If you look at the bottom, we talk about our special education students that have to be in person due to FAPE requirements. But as I've gone and visited every single one of the classes, each of those teachers that have had an opportunity to hear me speak to them and the paraprofessionals, I've made it very clear that if we start to have cases or transmission of cases, I will not hesitate to move back into a full-blown virtual mode of learning. I know that that has been extremely difficult for our teachers that are working with our high minute students, where they have the therapeutic services that we have to provide. But I will not hesitate to go back into a virtual platform if I feel that there's going to be harm. Keep going, because we will talk to you all about some of the testing that we're doing right now. Next slide. And so, as I've said, this is what we're looking at right now. Timeline considerations, our early childhood and high minute students, special ed students are still working right now in person. We will not move from that at this point. Our learning center models, right now, we're working on that. I think with these numbers, the way that they're looking right now, that's probably more of a concern for us, even with our learning center model. But when we give you the 1.1 update, we'll go into more detail around what that looks like, what we've done, what progress we've made in that. We talked about our hybrid phase in. We said that we would not break at this point. We're close to concluding this first semester. The second semester starts on February 1st. So if it is available for us to come back, we will come back. But I want to be very clear with everybody. We will not come back if we cannot get things under control. We will not have massive amount of adults in these facilities, which will ultimately result in us having to shut right back down, because we will not have enough people to be able to run our operations. And so February 1st is the target date. And people are saying, why so late? It's because we started the school year later. Remember, we do not end this school year until June the 11th. So at this point, the second semester would begin on February 1st, and it would give us a clean break. We also want to put out a questionnaire that would go out to our families to, once again, during the month of December, regarding the learning model choice for the second semester. Some people will want to remain in the distant learning program, which means that your kids will be in our, it would be in our Kansas City Virtual Academy, which means that you will be in there for the remainder of the year. So parents have an opportunity to either say, I'm going to stay in that, or I'm going to move out and I want to move into distance learning. And when you move into distance learning, if we are able to bring kids back, those students then will be back in school in a hybrid manner, in a hybrid fashion, where they would be in 2 days out of the week and then 3 days at home. And so that is our model that we are operating right now. Because we aren't bringing kids back, everybody is pretty much on this virtual and distance learning model. And it has allowed for us to maintain consistency. So we will engage our families to make sure that we know what we need to do as it pertains to the second semester, because it may require that we have to do some shuffling of teachers. Because if there are more people who are saying, I want to go to the distance learning model and not stay in the virtual, that will require us to have to shuffle teachers or vice versa. So we just want to make sure that we are giving our families that opportunity to give us that information. Next slide. And so we are looking at additional considerations. We're looking at testing options and making sure that KCPS is doing its part to provide the proper testing options. And so at this time, Sarah and Lauren, I want to bring both of you in to just provide the board and the community an update on where we are. I will say to everybody, we've been working with Mark and a number of medical experts over the last couple of weeks. We have been able to set up testing at several of our sites, and they'll talk about that a little bit further. We did test 49 of our faculty and staff members that are right now working to provide educational services to students in school. Those results have come back. Every single one of them have come back negative. So we are working on making sure that our workforce are getting the testing and that we have an idea of what that rate is amongst our adults. But 49 for 49 right now is a great sign for those that have been tested, that a number of our people are free of this virus. And then really individual responsibility in our community. I can't say it any clearer than this. If people want us to get kids back into school, you have to help us in this community. We have to display discipline. We have to wear our masks. We have to minimize having people in large groups. We have to be disciplined. All of the spread is happening in the community. We cannot bring people back if we do not operate with a level of discipline. So this is a team effort. This just cannot be on the school district to try to solve all of this on its own. This has to be a community effort. So at this time, I want to pass it over to Sarah and Lauren to just give everybody an update on where we are with testing.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Bedell. This is Sarah Williams, and I just wanted to report out, and Lauren Grimes is with me this evening. Lauren is our health manager for our COVID-19 response, and I'm our COVID response coordinator. Lauren and I met with Kansas City Health Department, Mark, Swope, Rogers, and KC Cares on Friday, November 13th as a follow-up to our pilot testing program for SPED staff, which occurred 11/6. And Dr. Bedell, that's the one that you were just talking about, in which 49 SPED staff were tested, and we had 49 negative test results, which was really good news to start out with our SPED staff back in the buildings. So now what we're looking at is progressing to utilizing Kansas City Public School sites for community testing for COVID, as well as flu shots, as well as utilizing those facilities to continue our testing with SPED staff and students, and with our early childhood staff and students as our first priority. So Mark has graciously partnered with us to allow us to be able to, or they've invested in that testing for us, and those are federally qualified healthcare providers, Swope, Rogers, and KC Cares will be setting up those community testing sites and giving our staff and students priority. It sounds like one of those organizations is going to launch next week, with the other two following closely behind. And what we expect to occur is for Mark to be able to, or for our community health partners to be able to set up indoors in our sites. With inclement weather coming, we want to do our part in the community to make sure our community is being tested, and then also giving that priority to our staff and students. Testing will be done on an appointment basis, And we're looking forward to a successful launch of those programs. We're considering the sites right now, most specifically of the AC Prep Field House over off Meyer, Northeast High School on Van Brunt, and Central High School at 32nd in Indiana. Lauren?
Any update, Lauren, on your end?
So my update I have on the CRL testing, we got our account last week set up, and today I met with CRL to fill out the paperwork for the orders. So as soon as we get that information from athletics, we will have that available. Once we place that order, that shipment comes in in 1 to 2 days.
Great. Okay, so board, that actually concludes my update to you all on where we are with the pandemic. You will get the update in a few minutes on what we're doing as far as the learning centers are concerned. And we've done some research looking at what other districts are doing around the country, what their numbers look like in that area, and trying to model some of what other systems have been doing. But at this time, we do want to open it up for questions. I'm certain there will be some.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. So I'm going to hopefully be able to see any of my colleagues who have questions at this time. Mr. Barca?
Just kudos to focusing on creating community testing sites for COVID-19 and also the flu vaccinations. I think those are critical in the community, especially over these next few months. I know that we do a lot around food, but I'd hope that there's another opportunity there, maybe to collaborate with harvesters and kind of create a triple opportunity there. So that would be my only encouragement there, but very happy and excited to see this progress.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I was scared to take the flu shot myself because I had a bad reaction from it a couple of years ago. And I actually took it myself this year because I think that the concern I have is it's really hard to figure out what's actually symptoms of COVID versus a flu or a common cold. So I figure if I can try to eliminate that variable, that will probably make it a little bit easier for me to figure out if something is wrong. So I would encourage everybody. I mean, the flu shots are available for everybody in the community. And I hope people will go on and look at this live stream and hear this, at least hear this part. Take advantage of it if we have this available in the vicinity of where you are. I think it can help you, just have some peace. And the other thing is, the worst thing that pretty much happens with it is your arm will hurt for like 2 days. You will feel like somebody punched you in the arm. That's really the worst. It goes away and you are pretty much protected for the most part through this season, which tends to often be a bad season every year with the flu. So we will look into the harvester piece. That's a great idea. So we can probably work with Jordan Gordon on that.
I think Ms. Wolfsey's got a question.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bedell. Would you, I know in the gating criteria where we are in the red right now, activities, it means we still have them, but then the one underneath that is spectators, we don't. Can you just kind of talk a little bit about how we're doing winter activities right now under this gating criteria?
Yeah, so at this point, we've been in conversation with the county. We were on with the county health department along with the city health department yesterday. My understanding is there will be a meeting that's supposed to take place on Monday, and we will get more guidance as it pertains to the order that went out. We right now have received information that they are telling us that students will need to wear masks if they're going to compete. I don't know what type of athletic masks are available. We will look into it. I don't know if the city is going to come in and say, hey guys, that you just can't do indoor sports right now. I'm waiting on that. And I just have to be transparent. This is what gets me in trouble. But I think this is something that you all respect of me, is that I do tell you, I speak my heart. I'm not going to be the only district to take away sports from these kids. I'm not going to do it because, you know, I think it's a lot of these kids this is a carrot for them. If we can do what we can and we made it through the football season. We did run into, I don't know, Lauren, how many actual positive cases did we have with our fall sports?
For students, we had 13.
We had 13, right? And I know every district had these cases. We made it through the fall season. I am concerned about indoor sports, and that's the reason why I'm really seeking guidance from the health department. But I also know that I know as a superintendent and I know as a former athlete, taking that away from me and everybody else in the area is still playing locally, I don't know how I can defend that. And then also as a parent of a son that this is his last opportunity and many of these kids' last opportunity to be able to move on and to showcase what they can do and have an opportunity to go to college or to get scholarship opportunities, you know, that really does impact our district significantly, not having those opportunities. So I'll be honest with you, Ms. Wolfsey, we all are seeking guidance from the health department on this one, and we should know more about that on Monday.
So as a follow-up to that question, kind of based on a conversation you and I had previously, yes, athletics, but could there also be some guidance on things like orchestra and band concerts? Because some parents have contacted us about, well, so you can have indoor sports, but you can't have an indoor concert. So just if we could get some guidance on that, I think it would help our parents understand a little bit better.
Yes, we will. And Linda, please, I know you're on that call and I know Kathleen is on that call, but when we get back on, let's make sure that we do remind them of that other aspect of that component of extracurriculars.
Dr. Bedell, I think I really appreciate the organization of the approach that you're taking, and I appreciate the care and the safety aspect. Can you just, for my I guess assumption is we are documenting and testing and revising and retooling our processes as we have been able to bring in special education students and as we start to test athletes. This is a opportunity for us to learn about what happens in the process of bringing families back in and our students back in and staff back in. And so, I mean, do you see this as a real learning ground? Are we trying to create some sense of fidelity, how we do this across our system that will give us able to create routine as we hopefully get to a place where we can start to bring additional students back?
Yeah, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right. It's twofold. One is fidelity. You know, I don't know what other districts are doing, but I know I really do believe we may be one of the first districts that have taken this effort to start getting our educators tested as we try to bring back. And, you know, we've been in with our early childhood teachers and students have been in since September. We didn't test them, but it's available for them. Like I said, we had one case with the adults because there's so few of them in the building. The opportunities are significantly reduced. But it is about putting in a process and having a system, but it's also about us being able to collect some action research data, basically, so that we can say to help ease anxiety of our other staff members. It'll be easy for us to say, here's the people, what we did when we brought in our high minute students, how many people got tested. Here's what our system looked like. Here's how we're going to go about testing you all as we try to work to get everybody ready to come back in. And Sarah and Lauren have been awesome with being very up to date and very intentional. And Sarah, I'll tell you, Sarah pushes back hard. She holds us accountable to try to do what we can to follow our gating criteria. That's why we had to put those disclaimers out on the bottom when we talked about our special ed kids, because we don't want people to think we're not following what we say we're going to do. But there are some caveats and there's some uniqueness in some of the subpopulations that we have to serve And so being able to do that, we wouldn't have done that had it not been for Sarah applying her legal lens and her legal eyes on these things. So we feel like as a district, we're being very proactive and we're being very safe. And if any of you haven't had an opportunity to put on a mask and to go look at the setup at our schools, I would encourage you to do so. It would help ease your anxiety around how prepared we've been for these kids that have come back into our schools. And a lot of that is because of the work of Sarah and Lauren working directly with our team to make sure that these things are checked off.
Thank you. Are there additional questions or comments that board members want to make? Mr. Barca?
Yeah, I just want to double down on what Ms. Wolfsey had said. Obviously, that balance and equity when it comes to our extracurriculars is critical. Dr. Bedell, I do want to ask and inquire. Obviously, the walkthroughs are very, very important. I want to know, I guess, what else we're doing to tap into our teachers to understand the real fears that are going on. I mean, I've got several direct emails from teachers who explain their situations are very dire health-wise, and that any exposure as we transition back could be life or death for them or members of their families. So I very much agree that there are elements that entice students to be back when it comes to athletics, but I want to make sure that's balanced, because as we go into this, I'm still struggling with that component around sports and the necessity of that. And the reality that if we are stating that the only reason why some kids come to school is for sports, then I think we're failing to some degree to entice kids for the reason why we exist. And so I want to make sure that we're thinking about all of this. And I will look forward to definitely stepping into the buildings, but I yearn for the voices that are not in the buildings, that are sitting back and resigned in their fears sometimes, and send me messages that say, please don't tell any building administrator because I fear for retaliation. And those things keep me up at night.
Yeah, well, it keeps me up at night too. And I think everybody used this retaliation piece, right? And it's getting worn out for me. That's everybody says retaliation. I hear, I get on with principals. Tell me when you've been retaliated against, right? Retaliation is not losing a teacher because we had to move a teacher to the virtual academy. Retaliation is so you getting written up as somebody getting rid of you. I think we have a system in place for teachers who are able to identify to us that they're not able to come back. They can go to HR, they can fill out the paperwork. We've been very methodical in what we've done. We didn't require teachers to come back. I think this district has been extremely responsive to meeting the needs of our teachers. There are districts where they said, okay, even though we don't have kids, you all have to come back and you need to work in your buildings. And I think we have listened to people, and I can't ease the anxiety. I think, all we can do is for the people who are in, when we said we were starting to bring kids back with high minutes, our early childhood center folks said, come and see what we're doing. We figured this thing out. It's working, right? And I think that will end up happening with our high minute students as we think about over time how we continue to work to support them. But so far, things have worked out pretty well, at least in the schools that many of us have gone and visited. And like I said, it's something that I encourage you all to take a look at. I think on that sports front, I do have to respond to that because for a lot of kids, it is a caveat. I mean, it is a hook. It was a hook for me. Not that I didn't like school, but I love sports, and sports was something that helped me. For a lot of our kids that are involved in extracurricular activities, I kind of view it as second to none behind academics. And so for our kids that are, like you said, cheerleaders, kids who participate in the band and all of those things, I do agree. We need to look at that and be more equitable, but figure out how we can do it safely, because for a lot of our kids, it is that hook. I shared this with people on a panel I spoke on yesterday. You would have taken sports away from me my junior year in high school. I'm probably not here talking to you all right now. I'm just being honest with you. So it is important. And I think that, it's one of those type of deals where it is difficult it is difficult to be the only system that would take that away. That is a very difficult one, and it's very difficult to explain that. And I'm not afraid. I'll do what I have to do. I've made that very clear. If it gets out of control, I will shut it down. But that's where you get death threats and all of that. I'm just telling you that's how it plays out. You start, it's a livelihood thing for some of these people and a future piece for them.
Dr. Bedell, I think we all appreciate, I think your an opening statement about everybody, no one's wrong, right? And that we're going to see passionate feelings on both sides. I think what I've observed in looking at school districts around the bi-state metropolitan area, some of the most aggressive and pronounced pushback from other public school districts in well-resourced suburban districts were initially the parents who were aggressively seeking to have access and prioritizing athletics above the other aspects. So I don't think we're not in an unusual situation. So I do appreciate it. I have another, it's not really a question, but it's a comment. You said that you're going to do a questionnaire of families. And I'm just hoping that, we have a very diverse family population. And I want to make sure that the surveying tool and mechanism, the engagement of families to provide their feedback, that there's some really specific and personal outreach so that we're not just tapping into some populations within our district and not all. So that's just a comment I wanted to make.
Yeah, I think we learned a lot from this summer when there was a number of parents we had to reach out to personally in order for us to get the data that we needed to make an informed decision before we had rolled out the plan to you all in August.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm looking to see if there's any other questions or comments. So Dr. Bedell, thank you for that update. And I think we now turn to the board policy presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So our board policy presentation tonight is on 1.1 student academic performance. And as I've stated, that's our primary reason for doing what we do, is to do everything that we can to help advance these kids academically, but also socially and emotionally. And so what you will get in this 1.1 is where we are in the midst of having to educate in a totally different manner. And so we want to update you on where we are, and everything that we provide to you is honest, very transparent data. And we will talk to you about what we're doing as we respond to the data. So Dr. Marla Shepard, we will pass this over to you.
Good evening, Dr. Bedell, Board Chair Mansur, board members, and community. Tonight, we are going to speak with you about Board Policy 1.1, which is student academic performance. First slide here, we spell out the policy. 1.1, high achieving critical thinkers, and we will talk tonight about all scholars will demonstrate proficient or advanced performance on state assessments. Although we do not have state assessments, we do have some data that we'll present to you, which we think can be an indicator of how students will perform if we use it correctly and if we use it wisely. And then number 2, all scholars will demonstrate literacy, numeracy, and critical thinking skills at or above grade level. So we will look at our iReady scores, and we will use that as the factor for number 2 in how we will proceed. One of the things that I want to make sure, the disclaimers that I want to make sure that I make is that although iReady is one of our data points, it is certainly not our only data point. We believe that when we're making critical decisions for children and their academic performance, it is critical that we triangulate multiple data sources. So tonight, what you will hear is one data source, really 2 data sources, because we're looking at participation and we're also looking at how students are doing on their iReady testing. I wanted to include our equity policy because I believe that we have to layer equity in everything that we do. And equity is just a part of how we make decisions. We have a tiered approach to everything we do. And as far as allocating resources and making decisions, we always try to do it in an equitable manner where we look at who needs what, who are we serving, who are we not serving, and then what are we doing about the ones we're not serving, and what is our plan to get better achievement or better outcomes for those who we may not be serving as well. And so tonight you will hear some of the tiered approach that we have used in this throughout this process and throughout looking at 1.1 and all the other data indicators that we have on the presentation tonight. Our metrics for COVID, we've always had metrics that the board has given us. However, now we're having to look at different metrics because we're in a different environment. And so I wanted to go over some of those metrics that we're using. The first is participation of students in distance and virtual learning. We want to look at the percent participation that we have. What are our kids actually doing, and how are they logging on? And then are they turning in their assignments? Then next we have iReady scores in reading and math. We want to look at how our kids are faring. We do have comparison data looking at where they were at this time last year compared to where they are this year, looking at any regression that they may have had. And then we'll be able to talk tonight about what our plan is for any regression that they may have and what we can do to make sure that our kids aren't farther behind by the time they do return to school. And then tiered level data regarding all indicators. And so we always take a tiered approach. We look at students and we look at schools and we tier and we make all of our resource allocations in every decision based on those tiers. And then the last one is interim assessment data. While tonight we will not be utilizing the interim assessment data, we won't have that until January. The interim assessments are more standards-based assessments. iReady gives us more of an indicator of where kids are compared to other kids in their grade level all around the country. It is a norm reference test. However, the interim assessment will be a criterion reference test. It will look at Missouri standards and how our students are faring on those standards. We're giving that in January and then again in March because we realize that it is still our responsibility to do everything we can. We may have to pivot and we may have to change some of our metrics. However, we still have the responsibility of making sure that children are learning and growing in the best manner that we can in this environment. And so next I will bring up David Rand, our Executive Director of Research and Accountability, to discuss our iReady participation rates.
Thank you, Dr. Shepard. Good evening, Madam Chair, Dr. Bedell, board and community. What we're looking at here are our overall participation rates for fall iReady testing. And so this reflects the percentage of students that completed the entire assessment. We had another chunk of kids that may have began or started the assessment, but did not finish it. Overall, we had 82% of our students in grades 1 through 9 take the test in reading and 84.4% in mathematics. When looking at this data, you can see obviously that those participation rates at 7, 8, and 9 start to fall off. What we see is that kind of aligns with our participation data as far as contact on a daily basis, that we are seeing more of a struggle at middle and high school in getting students to be online and be engaged. And so as we think about what we can do to kind of increase our participation rates in general, I think is really just making sure our kids are engaged on a daily basis and are showing up to class. And the more we can get them doing that, I think we'll see these participation rates go up as well. But I really want to commend the schools. It was not easy for them to get these students to test at home. Really appreciate all the efforts that our schools went through, including the virtual academy, because we asked those students to test as well. So with that, moving into the diagnostic results, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Dr. Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Rand. Thank you, Dr. Bedell, Madam Chair, board members, community. I'm pleased to share with you tonight our iReady data from this fall. So first we see here, we'll go through reading first, and then we will go through math. We're looking at the reading diagnostic 1, which is our fall data for our students 1st through 8th grade. iReady reports the domains in 3 tiers. So even though we still look at tier 4 kids and we still look at intervention specifically for our tier 4 kids, just know that this data is reported to us from iReady in 3 tiers. And what you can see from this is that our students are stronger in phonological awareness and high frequency words. And the domains that are more of a struggle for our students are vocabulary, comprehension literature, and comprehension informational text. That is across the country. We typically see lower scores in vocabulary and the comprehension. And later in the presentation, I'll talk to you about what we're doing to make sure that we have the right resources available to our kids so we can work on all of those domains. Here we have the iReady relative placements from fall to fall. So this is going to give you 3 years of data for our students. Now you can see here iReady does break it into 5 levels. If you think back to that last slide, tier 1, 2, and 3, tier 1, the green, is now broken into 2 categories for iReady. The darker green are students who are mid on grade level or above. The lighter green are students who are early on grade. The yellow are students who would fall 1 grade level below. And then they take that tier 3 kids that were red on the previous slide, and they break them into 2 categories. 2 grade levels below is the lighter red, and 3 or more grade levels below is the darker red. Here you can see 3 years. 3 can establish a trend for us. This would not be cohort data because we have students coming and going, so it's not exactly the same students. But you can see in 18, 19, 19, 20, 20, 21, we're fairly consistent. We have a little bit more in green this year. Due to us assessing our students from home, we definitely are going to be questioning the reliability of this data. But as Dr. Shepard said, and we will say to you numerous times tonight, iReady is only one data point that we use when we're looking at all information for our students. So we are looking at this data and studying it very hard, but you will see there are some data points where, even in talking to Curriculum Associates, a company with iReady, they said some of the data is up for interpretation. I do want you to also know that our iReady data that we are seeing is pretty consistent with what they're seeing across the country, where there was minimal slide in reading. Actually, no slide. It was smaller in reading than it was in math. So you can see that we do have 7,300 students on 2021 versus 88 in the other 2 years. We do equate that. You saw our participation is down, but additionally, some of our ELL and special education students, because of testing at home, could not get the accommodations that we would give if we were testing in school. So they are not represented in these numbers. So here we go even deeper into our grade level. This shows the 5 categories again at each grade level. Again, those greens are, the green and yellow is really at this point of the year, because this is fall data, this is the first diagnostic. Any student who falls in that yellow or any of the greens with solid tier 1 instruction has a very good chance of being proficient or advanced on any state assessment. Yellows, we still want to keep an eye on our students that fall in the yellow, and they could participate in some intentional interventions with our teachers based on the other data points we get. We'll be doing our interim assessments, and our teachers are doing daily checks for understanding to make sure students are progressing towards the standards. The red students, either color of the red, are the students we absolutely are identifying for intentional interventions. They are students that need more support. And again, I will talk to you later in the presentation about some of those supports that we are providing. The next slide will show us our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. Typically, when you see a summer slide or what we thought would be a COVID slide, you see bigger slides in the older grades. That's just what we see in our research and our data analysis. So seeing more red at 6th, 7th, and 8th is not as much of a surprise with this fall data points. Next slide. So this slide right here shows what we were looking for is whether or not we were seeing a lot of regression or slide due to COVID or the summer slide. I want to highlight how this works. And I thought I had a square on one of them, but I guess not. I thought I added that. But if you go to what this is this is looking at students. This is longitudinal cohort data, which means it's only students who tested with us in winter and tested with us in the fall. So it's the same group of kids. They placed them, that winter placement level on the far left is where the students scored in winter, whether they were in one of the reds, the yellow, or the green. So I'm sorry, I thought there was a square on here. I'd like you to look at the one grade level below row and go over to where it says 2 to 3. So you'll have a 15, a 38%, and a 384. So I want to talk you through that cell, the 15, 38%, and 384. What that means is when these are our current third graders, when they were in second grade last year, there were 384 of them who fell in that one grade level below. The fall score, the median student, the median children or child who fell at that median score, that 15 represents that their scale score went up by 15 points. Went up by 15 points. There was not a slide. That 38%, iReady measures students by typical growth and stretch growth. What they say is if a student scores here, this should be a typical growth that we should see under a year of solid instruction. So looking at that typical growth, that 38%, again, to that median children, whoever scored in that median score, they were already making 38% of their typical growth. So what iReady did here, Curriculum Associates, they highlighted any of our cells green where we saw growth and left it white where we saw loss. And when you look at this, we have a lot of green, meaning where our kids, maybe our instruction in the spring, some of the summer we've done, did help some of our kids, and we are on a good starting trajectory. They did tell me that our district, this graph was better than some districts. So we're doing well. We're going to keep monitoring it. So if we go to the next slide. So what are we doing as a district? What are our instructional shifts? Now remember, this is about iReady data, but this is also from data that we've been getting from our daily checks for understanding from our teachers and from previous years of MAP. So the first thing we're looking at is we did an analysis of our curriculum. We have to make sure that all of our students, the curriculum is to the grade level, the rigor and essence of the grade level standards by DESE. We need to make sure that our kids are being taught at that level. CIPD coordinators took the fourth quarter standards from fourth quarter from the previous year, from last year, and we determined which ones were priority. And we made sure that we embedded those within our curriculum this year at the place that makes sense. We didn't just put them in first quarter and taught last year's fourth quarter this year, first quarter. We said, if this is a standard that's a priority and students need it for this standard, then we embedded it within that unit. We have an intentional strong focus on those foundational skills. Remember, our phonological awareness is strong, but phonics is an area that we definitely need to keep an eye on. So we make sure we have a resource available that we made sure we could teach in a distance learning environment available for our foundational skills. In determining our priority standards, we first use student performance data. So we do have MAP data from previous years. We're able to see what standards are assessed on the MAP and which standards our students struggle with. There's also an acronym out there called REAL in the curriculum and instruction world, and it stands for, the R stands for readiness. Is this a standard that students need to be ready for the next level of instruction? Whether that's tonight's homework, tomorrow's lesson, next week's unit, or next week. The E stands for endurance. Does this standard provide endurance beyond a single test date? Is this something kids will need for life? The A stands for assessed. Is the standard assessed? If the standard is assessed and we do not give kids instruction to that standard, we're not setting them up to be successful. And the L is leverage. Does the standard provide leverage beyond a single content area? If it's a standard where students will see it in multiple areas, it should be a priority standard. So CIPD did that work and made sure that we have the priority standards identified, and they are actually identified on our curriculum maps, so teachers know what our priority standards are. We took a look at our instructional framework. We knew we were going to be in a different environment this year, and we knew we could pivot at any time. So we wanted to make sure that our instructional framework and our instructional design template will allow our teachers to be able to pivot at any time. So we are very intentional with our asynchronous and our synchronous lessons. Our synchronous lessons are the lessons where the students are in front of the teacher. Our asynchronous lessons are the lessons where teachers are assigning tasks through Seesaw or Google Classroom, and students are going on and working on those tasks. We are very intentional with our grade level work, which usually occurs during those synchronous sessions. And back to that curriculum, making sure that our students are accessing the curriculum at the rigor and essence of grade level. Small group is absolutely crucial. That's where those red kids come in. What are the intentional interventions we're going to put in place? Small group is an intentional intervention. Our data should help our teachers identify which students need which standard and which strategy is going to help them. So small group is that time when teachers can fill the gaps that students have. So grade level work is occurring during whole group. During small group, we're able to fill the gaps. Our students are also able to access iReady, because remember, iReady is not just an assessment platform. It's also a platform that provides a pathway for kids, and that pathway is intended to close those gaps for kids as well. We have our interventionists. We have our reading interventionists who work with our students daily. They have a group of students. They are our tier 3, tier 4 students that they are working with on a daily basis. And they are helping those students with misconceptions and filling those gaps as well. That interventionist meeting is in addition to meeting with their classroom teachers. So our students who need the most support are getting the most support. When we purchased resources, back to that data about our comprehension of literature and informational text being low, we wanted to make sure that our kids had access to grade level complex texts. So we purchased Discovery Ed, we purchased Newsela, we purchased Raz Plus. Not only do they provide our kids with complex texts, but they are also texts that our teachers and our students can access in a remote or distance learning environment. We also made sure that our texts and resources give our teachers and students access to really work on those foundational skills. For professional learning, we can always have more time with our teachers. We always could have some more time really providing them strong professional learning. Our CIPD coordinators go into classrooms, observe teachers, and give them coaching sessions, really help them with their pedagogy. The CIPD coordinators do ELA chats where they invite teachers after school to come to a Teams meeting and just ask them what they're thinking about. And our CIPD coordinators sit in instructional design sessions and help teachers design instruction, especially for those asynchronous and synchronous lessons. So that's reading, so we can go on to math. Math will be very similar, so I won't need to get into great detail. Diagnostic 1 results by domain. Again, iReady does 3 domains. Does the domains by 3 tiers. So you can see that here. And we can go on. And then again, how has the math progressed from year to year? You can see again over the 3 years, we see a little bit of an increase in the green and a little bit of a decrease in the red. Same here, we'd be looking for those kids to fall within the yellow and the green. Here's our data for grade level math. And 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Once again, this data shows you we're looking for those greens. When we find the green, it's indicating that our students are not seeing as much of a drop. Yes, we have more whites in math, and math across the board saw more of a drop. Math is not as cyclical as reading, so this is typical that we could see a drop like this in math. I'm not going to go through all of this again because this is the exact same thing we're doing in reading. The only thing is our resources in math. We need to make sure that the resources we've provided, and again, very difficult in a distance world. So we have some online manipulatives available to our teachers where they can do the concrete, then the pictorial, then the abstract for all of our kids who need some additional support. All right, I'd like to go into interim assessments. Dr. Shepard talked about that we will be doing interim assessments. So why interim assessments? The interim assessments we're going to be administering our students allow us to be a truly data-driven district. We get to really look at the data. It will be grade level standards. We will know exactly which student needs support with which standard, and the teachers can decide which strategy is the best to teach that. Our teachers will be able to get up close up and personal with the data. In some cases, it might be an issue that the student doesn't have the stamina to complete the assignment or the assessment. It could be that the student struggles with a certain item type. Teachers will be able to determine that through these interim assessments. And it provides our students opportunities to experience a high stakes assessment prior to taking the actual high stake assessment. So our interim assessments will be mirrored, which means it will be the same standards, same item types, same cognitive complexity, but it will be different numbers, different texts, different experiments, so it's not the exact same test. Using a mirrored interim assessment allows us to identify if students would be proficient on the state assessment and whether or not we're seeing growth. We will be administering 2 interim assessments, the weeks of January 11th and 18th, and the weeks of March 15th to the 22nd. CIPD has already identified the standard. They went through DESE blueprint, looked at all the standards, have identified the standards, and we have provided those standards to our teachers.
What's
so they know
CIPD?
which standards.
I'm sorry, what's CIPD?
I'm sorry, thank you. CIPD is Curriculum Instruction Professional Development. That's our curriculum coordinators.
Great.
Thank you for that. And then the final slide for me is these are all the subject areas in which we will be giving our interim assessments. You will see some areas there that are not MAP or EOC, but that's because we believe in being a data-driven district and we want the data in all of these courses. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jackson.
As a district over the last, or during the summer months, we spent a lot of time, a lot of energy focusing in on how do we ensure that our students are getting engaged in the learning once we begin school in late August. And in doing so, we look at a record number of students having devices, and we are handing out hotspots. So we've given the students and the families the equipment to be successful with engaging. And so now we're looking at how engaged are our students overall in the district when it comes to distance learning and virtual learning. And what we found through looking at the various points of data, that 77% of our students are regularly participating in classes across our district. Now, regularly, when we use that term, about 70% of the time, those students are logging in. So 3 to 4 days a week, they're logging in for the entirety of the course or the time they have with that teacher during that synchronous time when they're face-to-face with that teacher. And that's our contact or no contact time that we have with those students. So we're counting that contact, 77%, which you look at attendance, that means 77% of our students are showing up to school every day. While that is not the number we want to be at, certainly we want to see all of our students, 100% of our students engaging every day. And as would be the case, 85% of our students at the elementary level, so it's a higher average at the elementary than it is at the secondary. Well, secondary is about 65% of the students are logging in consistently for every period of the day during our online learning. And so we're continuing to work and continue to create plans and processes, and we'll talk a little later in our presentation about some of those plans and processes to increase this number and taking a real fine-tooth comb and processing that. And so in addition to that, we looked at how are students engaging with the assignments, with the work that's happening. And so those students who are showing up, and then how many students are actually turning in the assignments and getting engaged in that particular way consistently and regularly. Again, looking at about 70% of our assignments being turned in and turned in on time. We got about 66% of our students doing that. And so we are in the next couple of days and weeks going to be taking a deep dive into our grading practices and what are we doing, what kind of assignments are being posted, how are they aligning to our curriculum, are these assignments that are meaningful and engaging to our students, and are they relevant? And so that students see the need for them. You know, some of the examples we put on the table, if we have a math homework, do we need 50 problems? And our students getting burned out from being overwhelmed with the number of assignments that are happening. So they're picking and choosing which assignments they're doing. And so we're going to take a real good look at what's happening in the grade books of our teachers and how can we better align that work to best utilize both the time of the teacher and the time of those students when it comes to what we're assessing. So some of the things we're doing to look at and deal with engagement and checking in on students and getting them engaged within the learning are those hourly check-ins at the elementary level, and at the secondary level, students are going to period by period. And so that's in essence an hourly check-in for them at the secondary level as well. And then attendance is taken regularly, both at the secondary and the elementary level to see and again adjust where needed. Where students are not showing up, we're making phone calls, we are reaching out to families. And in this season that we're in, our families hold all the keys. They have to make sure the student's in front of the computer, that the computer is turned on, charged up, and those pieces. And so we are certainly building relationships with families to get those students engaged and turning in assignments in our online platform. If that's Seesaw, if that's Google Classroom, we're engaging our families to ensure those students are turning in those assignments along the way. And then another piece that teachers are doing to, again, engage our students is using small group settings. And that's where you get a chance to really either do some extensions of the learning or do some remediation of learning in smaller settings where you have 3 to 5 kids and able to have some more intimate conversations around the work. And then again, we'll talk a little later around some teams that are supporting students that are not attending. If they're not showing up, expect they're not showing up regularly, then we have a team of folk across our system that are reaching out in essence, either by phone, and if we need to, we're making some door calls. We're stopping, knocking on doors and saying, we need you engaged in the learning. So the piece that we're looking at and really starting to delve into as we look at how students are being graded, what those grades are, what are your academic goals and plans for the school or our school improvement plans. And every school across our system is required to have a school improvement plan. And those school improvement plans are checked regularly. And we're going through one of those checks now with the assistant superintendents meeting with each of the schools and their leadership teams, along with our curriculum instruction, professional development team, to talk through their 3 major goals. There are a lot of goals that schools have, but we want them to pull out the 3 major. And one of those 3 major goals has to be around the academic side of things. How are we shifting that improvement of our student engagement in the learning from where we are at 66% turning in assignments or 77% of our students being engaged online? What's your plan? How do we move that number on your campus to where 100% of your students are actively engaged and learning across the campus. And we've also revisited those plans for our comprehensive schools. Our regional school improvement team from DESE comes in, and those plans are talked through with those schools at a second level around what they're doing when it comes to teacher development, what we're doing when it comes to our leadership development of the principal and its team, and also around the academic goals that are set, math, science, literacy. And so those are the pieces that we look at in those plans. And again, each school has one, and we're going through a review with each individual campus throughout this month and next month.
Good evening. I'm going to talk now about the interventions that we have in place for students who are not participating. Earlier today, we gave the concrete data of the number of students who are engaging every day and involved with the instruction. I'm going to talk about the things we are doing for the students who are not. So basically, it's the same things that we have in place during the normal course of the school year for the most part. When students are not logging in, we have the teacher who's calling the home every day, basically trying to find out why the student is not logging in. Once they do that, they document by putting a note in Tyler. Also, we just followed the attendance procedures that we normally have in place. We have a attendance committee. So when students miss a certain number of days, the attendance committee becomes involved. They send certified letters home. They put students on the plan. And one thing that's unique for this situation, a lot of the reasons for students not logging in had to do with technology. So one thing that's happening in all of our schools, we have teachers, principals, assistant principals going to homes directly and assisting parents with logging in and just technical support. I had a home visit like 2 weeks ago, and when I knocked on the parent's door, the parent told me that in 1 week, the principal had been to the home 2 times, his teacher has been to the home 2 times, and also the assistant principal came once just to help with technical support. So I do want to just shout out to our schools and the entire staff for going into these homes, trying to help our parents and students engage with our technology. Okay, so one of the things that we have in place to ensure that our students who are struggling become more engaged are learning centers. We want to open our learning centers. We plan on doing it in December, but because of the surge in COVID cases, we want to do this in January. We're going to establish learning centers, and all learning centers is a structured environment where students could come in and engage with the distance learning process inside of a building where they'll be supervised by adults. We plan on having 3 learning centers in our system, 2 elementary hubs and 1 secondary hub. And we do not plan on having any more than 100 students in every learning center because we want to make sure we continue to follow the social distancing protocols that we have in place. So there will be no more than 10 students in the classroom. If we have to go more than 10 and go to 12, that will be our limit. So we plan on staffing these learning centers with paraprofessionals, CDE, and LINK staff. We also have, as you know, we have our child sites also already open, and we have CDE, LINK, and some other agencies working with us, and we want to just thank them now for that support. It'll be just like a normal school day. Students will be picked up by bus and dismissed by bus. We'll have lunch and breakfast provided. And again, we'll have opportunities for direct instruction because we did decide that since these will be some of our more struggling students, we're going to have members of the CIPD team and also school leadership come in and do tutoring. During the course of the school year, one of our middle schools was struggling. We had some unexpected vacancies. So I know myself, Dr. Shepard, and some other members of the CIPD team, we went into this middle school 4 hours every week to provide direct instruction, basically basic math instruction. And we plan on doing the same thing in our learning centers because, as you know, just having them come in is not enough. We're going to do everything possible to make sure these students improve. And we're going to talk about the criteria in a minute, but one of the criteria is the students who are 2 or 3 grades below. And if you're that far below, you need some additional support. So that's why we're going to have some direct instruction provided by members of our BOE team.
Dr. Slade, let me just, before you go to the next one, chime in. Because I don't know whether the community or the board even is aware of this. You all did step up, and as you all may not know, Dr. Slade is a former math teacher. Dr. Shepard is a former math/science teacher. 2 of these folks that are in an executive level position, along with a number of our people in our curriculum instruction, professional development department, went in and provided direct instruction. And so we talk a lot about not just telling people that are in the trenches that you have to shoulder the load on your own when it comes to needing to give these kids additional supports. These are people in central office that are willing to step up and go above and beyond. And, you know, for Dr. Slade to come to us as we were planning this out to say, I'm going to take full ownership over this. I'm even willing to serve as an instructor to help these kids that are falling behind. I just felt that it was something that I wanted him to talk about, not to brag on himself, but to let everybody know that central office is going to do its part to be in the trenches, helping support our educators and giving our kids what they need. So I just wanted to personally commend you all that did that last semester before COVID-19 hit us.
Again, Dr. Bedell, just to include, that was the whole entire CIPD team that came in there. I mean, every Tuesday and Thursday, 3 hours after school during those times. And the only reason we stopped was because of COVID. So I want to make sure we shout those people out too, but thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the criteria for our selection process for the learning centers, we're looking at just 3% of our student population for each school, meaning no more than 10 students for the most part for every school. And the reason we had to have that number so low is because we had some staffing issues in terms of we really could have 3,000 students in the learning center, but we don't have staff to accommodate that. So the staff that we have can accommodate about 300 or 400 students. So we had to limit that number to 3%. And we all want to try to work on acquiring more staff, but we do want to help our most struggling students first. The other criteria, students who are two or more grades below reading and math based on the iReady data we talked about today, also other sources that schools have. Students who are currently in danger of failing multiple classes because they're not logging on for various reasons. And also just students who have a very, 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 very low participation rate. We're talking more like 10 to 20%. Okay, these are our proposed learning hubs, and I'm going to talk about why we selected these hubs. We want to have one at Gladstone. If you're not aware, the Northeast area has 50% of our student population. So 50% of our student population lives near that Northeast high school, Northeast middle school area. So we really needed a hub there. And these are the schools that will be part of that hub. The other two schools, King and Paseo, we selected those schools because those are the most centralized schools in our system, and it would make it much easier for us to provide transportation and daily food service. So those two schools were selected. This is just a quick example of how the model will work out. You see the schools assigned to Gladstone. If you look at 3%, just an example, Phillips has about 300 students right now. So 3% of that would be 9 students. Looking at Rogers, they have 600 students. 3% of that would be 18 students. And the total number of students for this particular model is 105. And if possible, we may increase that number, but it's dependent on our COVID situation at the time. Okay, so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. There are several school systems across the country who are doing the same thing. So we decided to look and see what they were doing. And the main thing I wanted to point out with this slide is that some of these very, very, very large systems, like, and the data for Chicago is wrong. They actually have almost 400,000 students in Chicago, but they only have 480 students in their learning centers for the same reason that we can't have thousands of students. It's very, very, very hard to staff these learning centers, basically because of what we talked about today, the concerns with adults coming back in the buildings because of COVID-19. So if you just look at this slide, you see that we're going to have 300 students in our learning centers. And if you look at some of these much larger systems, they have about the same amount of students. You go to the next slide. So there will be some challenges like with everything else. And one thing that Dr. Bedell always tries to do is just be honest and upfront. So we're going to address the challenges up front. One of the challenges will be, again, like I said earlier, we have thousands of students who could benefit from the learning centers, but we only have space right now for 300. So what we're going to do basically is have waiting lists. We're going to try, once we open the learning centers, to open some more once we can acquire more staffing. And we've been meeting with the different agencies in our community trying to see if they can help us out with staffing, but they're having the same staffing issues that we're having. I know the Boys and Girls Club and the Parks and Recs Agency, they're having staffing issues, but those are the sites that are helping us with our childcare, and they are willing to add more sites to accommodate students. We talked about the need for direct instruction, and we talked about how we'll address that, and we also talked about the COVID-19 concerns. If you didn't know, last year, KCPS had one of the highest graduation rates in the recent history of the system. And I just wanted to give a shout out to the students, parents, principals, teachers who helped that happen. Also, Major Brooks and his team did a great job. So we want to make sure that continues. So we're going to do the same exact things this year. And what happened last year that made it different, we really started to focus on graduation from the very first day of school. We didn't wait until near the end of the year like sometimes we do in the system. We started the very first day of school and everybody was involved. We're going to do the same thing this year. One thing I do want to shout is our dropout prevention team. What those people do is they go out in the community and find the students who dropped out and they try to get them to enroll back in school. And if you look at the next slide, already this year, we have 62 students who the dropout team, Major Brooks and his team, Mr. Rand and his team, they've gone out and they've recovered 62 students already this year who had dropped out, but now we have them back inside of a school program. Any questions?
Thank you so much to all of you who presented. I'm really blown away with so much of this presentation. I'm ready for all of it to start. So as I'm having a hard time containing myself, I'm going to open it up for questions and comments from board members. So wave at me so I see you.
Madam Chair, I do want to put something in just real quick before the board starts to weigh in. I don't know if any of you had an opportunity to listen to the conversation I had yesterday on the panel with City Year. And one of the things I shared with them was my concern with the data. It's the same concern that I've shared with our commissioner. I have concerns about the reliability of our data because we have spoken with teachers, and one of the board members, I think it was Ms. Cortez, was with me when one teacher talked about, some of her kids who were scoring higher than what they normally would score if they were in person. And I've also heard from teachers who were saying, they had a number of kids that they know scored lower than they normally would score. So it makes me wonder about the conditions that some of our kids are testing under. And then it also makes me wonder, I know that when you look at our elementary numbers, they are higher, and rightfully so. It's a lot easier to get those kids in. And they're tied in exactly with their class. So I think when you look at the early primary years, that's something that we've kind of used some deductive reasoning to say there's a high number of kids who are performing higher than I think they would have performed had they been in front of us in person. So I wonder, are they getting assistance at home? Is it an older sibling helping them, or is it a parent that's helping them and may not be aware that, hey, this is an actual assessment to help us figure out where the gaps are. So, I think that's a concern, and it's also a concern amongst a number of districts that are a part of the Council for Great City Schools. So I just want to put that out there because I don't ever want to try to have data out there that people are like, well, that don't make sense. There's some things that definitely don't make sense, and we want to make sure that we are very aware of how some of the scenarios where kids are testing under is playing out, whether it's hurting or helping our students. So that's something that we just have to continue to dig deeper into.
Thank you. Dr. Jones had raised her hand first. It looks like Ms. Cortez would like to go next.
Okay, and so I had just a couple questions. I'll try to be brief. The first one, so the average of like 20% of students, I forgot which slide, maybe slide 47 or 46, Dr. Fitzgerald showed, and we saw that across each grade level, particularly once you got into the higher grades, the participation in the I-ready kind of was lacking. And so I wonder, what assumptions do you make about those students who aren't participating, and do those those students get lumped into the group of people that you reach out to get to participate in the next round, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we are concerned about the participations, particularly at 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. But keep in mind, and it does go with our participation in class. But remember, we have those daily checks for understanding. So our teachers are still keeping an eye. It's not the only assessment that we use to know. So we're able to still keep that daily pulse on our kids. We will have that interim data coming up. So we will hopefully get interim data on those students. We also use iReady for instructional, there's an instructional usage for our iReady kids, which does show us what pathway they're on, and teachers are able to go in and based on if kids, how much time they spend on a lesson and then what percentage pass they have, we're able to shift their pathway. So we're also able to go in and work with iReady that way for our students. So we're able to still have some data. We just didn't have it on this testing day.
And Dr. Jones, I do want to remind all of the board members that some of the children did not test because we felt like there were not optimal conditions for them to test at home. And that would be namely some of our special education students and some of our English language learners. They will test though. We will test them when we get them back in the building. We have 3 rounds of testing. And so, hopefully, if we are able to get them back in the building in early February, late, whenever we do return, we will get more data on them. But please be mindful of the fact that everybody is not included in this data set. And then some of those tier 4 kids that we're talking about bringing to the learning centers, they're probably not in this data set either because they may not have optimal conditions at home for them to test. And so that is one of the reasons why we felt like we needed to begin looking at some of this, some of the learning centers and what the criteria needed to be for those students to come.
Thank you for that clarification. And just one just thought I'll put out there so we can get to the next colleague. But when I look at some of the data and I think about and the participation rates, I think about the fact that in a household I came up in, I would not have been participating. And so I just think, it's just passed my mind that I hope that at some point when we think about next year, which should be much better, we got a vaccine, everything's going back to normal. I just hope at some point we can transition to thinking about how do we catch those students back up? Because just frankly, it just dawned on me, like, I know I would be the student who was like, well, this year's just gonna pass me by. And we'll just pick up next year. And so I know that's just going to be a cumbersome challenge for the district. But I know that, all the minds that you guys have around this in CIPD will be able to figure that out. So just thank you. But it's not lost on me that that's going to be the next challenge that we're facing.
So Dr. Jones, just to add on to that, that's going to be I think we'll have a part 2 of our discussion in cabinet on Monday about the calendar. Because we do believe that we're going to have to take a different look at that calendar and we're going to have to engage the community on some alternative calendar options that we believe would allow for us to truly capture some additional instructional hours that we could utilize to help close some gaps throughout the school year next year. So that is going to be the second phase of our conversation that happens this upcoming week on how we're going to roll all of that out and engage the community.
Ms. Cortez?
So two items. One, actually following on Dr. Bedell's comments, Dr. Shepard's comments, and Dr. Fitzgerald's comments around the data. And are you looking at it, or are you trying to do some extrapolation to look at what the data would look like if you included a proxy for the students who are not able to participate? Because in looking at the aggregated data, I am making an assumption that their lack of presence is overstating some of the overperformance, even not taking into account assistance at home. If you're showing it in relative terms, the absence of that group in the data will cause will distort things as well. So at least internally, are you doing some extrapolation around where you believe the numbers would really be if you had been able to assess all of your students?
Want to answer? Yes.
So I can speak to that. So we took a look at how many of our special education and ELL students tested last fall versus this fall. Among our special education students, the numbers were pretty similar, so we didn't see huge amounts of those students. Where we did, we were down about 250 among our ELL students in reading and about 150 in math. And so those numbers would maybe affect a couple percent, but it would not have a huge impact on the data.
Ms. Cortez, any other questions?
The other piece actually follows on to both Dr. Jones and Dr. Bedell's comments about the calendar and kind of the thinking around catching up. And this is, I mean, I appreciate how challenging it has been and continues to be to plan for certainty in an uncertain world. But I find myself wondering if there's some value in planning, you know, whether it a strategy that we could put in place when we believe, you know, there is a lot of light at the end of the tunnel right now. Nobody knows if that's how far down the tunnel it is, right? But if we have the opportunity to take advantage of the summer to implement kind of some kind of instructional or intensive
camp
learning,
something.
I'd be curious about whether it's the summer or the fall, but you know, are we thinking about kind of a quick action plan once we see that opportunity and how to focus that on particularly on our kids who would be learning center kids or would be kids in the next 3% or the next 10%? You know, do we kind of have a separate strategy that we could take action on with relative rapidity once we see that opportunity present?
So let me respond to that, and my instructional people could too. What's going to be difficult? What's going to be difficult is, let's say we do get the community to agree that we want to move to this 60-20 calendar or whatever the different options we have. Knowing that we in school on June 11th could also present a problem with a tight turnaround. Because if we were to say, we're going to start at the beginning of August, and then we're going to go from August to November, and then November becomes a month off and it's all intercession that does exactly what you do. I think the concern will be if we get it approved, it's going to be a tight window. We won't have a whole bunch of time to do the interventions at the level that we want to do it. Will we be able to do something? Yes, Ms. Cortez, I believe we'll be able to do something. But I think a lot of it is going to be dependent. If we're able to pull off and get everybody to agree to this calendar option, that may close the window that we normally would have during the summer, you know, because we would have started at the end of August rather than the beginning of August. So that's the only variable right now that we can't control for until we engage the community and see where we are. But yeah, that we 100% will be doing something like that regardless.
I appreciate that. I know that there are lots of complications in those variables, but
yeah,
you know, I think anything that gives our kids a running start to get
absolutely
back their focus, it would be, you know, worth the push, worth testing, worth talking about.
We're very committed to that. Trust me on that one. The only thing I was thinking was the amount of time that we would have if we were to go to that early start.
Okay.
Mr. Hogan?
Yeah,
Ms. Cortez, did you have another question or are you good? Okay, Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, so thanks for the presentation. Thanks. I mean, I know that I can't imagine how many people actually are engaged in trying to sort of not just put a presentation like this together, but also, you know, working with the kids as they go do these assessments. I mean, I'm sure it's a giant number. It'd be interesting just from a geek standpoint to learn that. I guess my question is pretty broad. Like, what can the board do to support you guys in this effort, right? I mean, we oftentimes ask a lot of really pointed questions. I think those are good, and it's part of what we should be doing as a board. But stepping back a little bit, what can we do to support you guys to make sure that you can sort of maximize the potential that the district has with these kids?
I mean, right now for me, and you guys can chime in, the biggest support is I mean, honestly, helping us get this, if we can get this calendar piece and we can get broad support for that, that becomes a game changer. Mark my word on that. I really think it would give this school district a new look. We've taken advantage of a pandemic. And I think it will truly have us looking back, you know, on the other side of history, that we really did take advantage of this opportunity. Is it going to make some people uncomfortable? Yeah, anytime you have change of that magnitude, especially when you've been doing things like we've been doing for the last 30 to 40 years, it is gonna make people feel uncomfortable. But if we know that we have full support of this board and what we wanna do, and you guys see that this absolutely makes sense, we've run this calendar by our union president, by a number of teachers. It's already received a lot of positive feedback. The last phase of it is just getting it out to engage the community in it. And that's a game changer for us, in my opinion. So that's probably for me from a system-wide standpoint. And I'll let Dr. Shepherd kind of chime in on some more probably granular things.
I think we have everything we need as far as resources to get it done. When I say resources, I mean instructional resources. Just the latitude to be able to think outside of the box. That is what I think, if you were to ask many public school educators, what is it that you can do for us to help us to better do our jobs? Many would say, please give us the latitude to be able to think outside of the box, to be able to work with the community, to be able to do something that is different. We know that anytime you bring change brings with it a whole lot of different emotions. You know, we've had this change, this pandemic thrown on us, and we've all just adjusted. So people adjust and change. It's just the initial reaction to change that sometimes is very hard for many to get beyond. And so the question is, are we willing to deal with the initial reaction to the change so that we can do something different? I think we're ripe for doing something different. We've tried, you know, the same thing in education for tons of years, and we've got tons of data around whether it works or not. I mean, you can look at it from place to place and you can make your own determination as to whether or not it works. But in order for us to really do something that we feel like can really help kids, we're going to have to do something different than what we've already been doing. And so just the support to do those things.
Got it. Thanks.
Ms. Wolfsey, did you have a question? I'm sorry. Okay. I had a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. There are a lot of things, but I'll be focused. One is really about this conversation about stamina and endurance. And I think a lot of us, even as adults, we are experiencing a lot of fatigue. There's a lot of stress and strain and change that we've all had to undertake. And I know how it just feels in my own head and body. So I'm trying to imagine what it feels like in a child's, you know, brain and body as well. But I do worry, I have a worry about, you know, as we've gone to this mode and the contact time with teachers is less, how do we counter for the potential loss of stamina and endurance? Because we know at some point we will come back at some future point. This isn't hopefully our lifelong state. And so how are you countering for the loss of stamina and endurance or diminishment of that?
I think the piece around that, and that's a very good question. That's what we're really focusing in on the next few days. Start looking at what are we putting in front of students? Why is it in front of the kids? And what are we gaining from the assessment that we have from it? If that's a whatever kind of assignment it is, because oftentimes we feel as if because they're not in front of us a certain number of minutes or a certain number of hours, and they need to be spending time doing this other work. But there is a pandemic going on. There are stressors. There's some social and emotional things that are happening. And I think our team as a district is doing a great job of really keeping focused on that this is a whole child experience that we're dealing with. And we want to make sure that our teachers are stepping back to look at, I mean, they're doing a great job and they're working really hard. I mean, our system is working really hard, we want to make sure we're working smart and that we're working on those priority standards. We're working on those things which will give us the best outcome, best possible outcome for our students. And it's going to mean that we've got to really take a fine-tooth comb and look at what are we putting in front of kids. And again, is it meaningful? Is it necessary? You know, there are these things, those nice to knows, the knows those got to knows. We got to really focus in on those got to knows.
So this is maybe just, might not require an answer right now, but when I think about some of this stamina endurance, and I'm thinking about how are we supporting students who have additional challenges, like students who have limited or interrupted education. I don't believe they're not part of that FAPE category. So I'm wondering, how are we helping those students who are more in our New Americans category? And also, what is the current situation as to how we provide support for our homeless students to make sure that wherever they are located, whatever their housing situation, that they have technology access and some kind of supports available to make it possible for them to be active and engaged. So I'm thinking about those populations. There may be some others.
When it comes to our students, certainly that are limited formal education, we're providing the same supports we would provide if they were with us. In essence, we still have our, in essence, caseworkers who are looking out for those students and really working with them one-on-one, having those smaller settings. And we have interpreters in several languages who ensure that when we're zooming in, or I say zooming, we can't zoom, but when we're going those classes via distance learning, that those students are able to get the level of support they need when it comes to their language support as we bridge them into the English language learners and our ESOL teachers. You know, those students are still working with them, although virtual. And I know that our ELL team is very diligent with their caseload of students as they reaching out to them when they're not connecting to classes. They are being very proactive around making sure those students feel connected, and oftentimes that's connecting with those families in that native tongue, ensuring them and making sure they understand what that student needs to do. And parents, when you look at a lot of our high population ELL campuses, those attendance rates, those contact rates are fairly high. And that's, I attribute that to those ESOL teachers and ELL paraprofessionals who are really reaching out to those families to keep them engaged. And that's another population we would love to bring back pretty quickly within those learning centers or opportunities like that to support those students once we have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Additional questions from the board?
Ms. Manser, to address your question about the homeless population, Dr. Woodley's team has done a great job working with our homeless population and some of our other populations that may need additional support. So she can address that question.
Okay, Board Chair, Manager, we have been doing a lot of work with our homeless population. As we're going to give a little bit of that presentation tonight, but we'll give you more information on December when we present our information about our social emotional supports that we have. The homeless team, the students in transition, are now under our department. And so what we've done is we made sure that all of our homeless students have not only the technology provided by our district, we also have individual cell phones for students to be able to keep engaged with their teachers, and so that we're able to kind of make sure that they have what they need. We actually have team members that actually go out into those different communities, to the shelters, to the different places that our students are, to make sure they're providing those supports. And then we, as our clinicians, provide wraparound services to make sure those families have exactly what they need.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up on what Dr. Jones said, that was a great comment. We still, and schools are doing everything possible. We have schools that are meeting students at the library, meeting students wherever they could get internet access, but we still have a small percentage of students who, as Dr. Jones said, they're just not engaging for multiple reasons. I had a principal call me at 10 o'clock last night from his building because he has students who are working and taking advantage. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but this pandemic has created a situation where we have some of our teenage students who are working, making $1,000 a week, who this is just an opportunity for them to bring money into their home. So regardless of what the principals are doing, the draw of that dollar bill is keeping them away from their computer. So there are still a couple of unique situations. And then we have students who just live in situations where, as Dr. Jones said, it's just difficult for them to engage. So I do just want to point that out, that although we're doing the principals and teachers are doing tremendous work, but it's still that small segment of the population that it's just still hard to reach them based on what's happening out here in society right now. And I do know a lot of our high school students are working and making a lot of money right now, more than they've ever made. And that's been the biggest obstacle for some of the high school principals, just trying to put these students from working all these hours so they can engage with instruction. I just had to add that because I didn't want it to seem like there still is that segment that we are still struggling to reach, but the principals and teachers are doing everything possible. But again, it's just a different environment out here. I mean, we have students working 50 hours a week. And again, like I said, I had a principal out in his building at 10 o'clock last night trying to address this, but it's just a real life situation right now.
And honestly, I think when Dr. Slade and I did our visits to schools, that was one of the, I don't know if it was I think it was Dr. Slade. The teacher actually told us that she had a couple of kids that were working full time, and was basically saying, Dr. Bedell, even if when we bring them back to school, you know, some of these kids, there are some kids who are actually working and they're working well under their schedule. So it's kind of like, how do you bring them back if they're having success in school, but they're also able to work? What are we going to do about that? I'm worried about that kid that is having success and will drop out. So, you know, Ms. Cortez said it best earlier. It's so many different pieces to this that we got to consider when we do come back, because this has also exposed us that, you know, this traditional brick and mortar mode of how we do business has also been very restrictive with a family and a population where they really do need the kid to help out to be an income earner. And if they can do that while also still being able to get their education, why would we take that away from them? So, I mean, it's just a lot that we're learning right now. And it's going to give us opportunities as we think about how we need to conduct schooling in the future to better serve the community that we have to serve here. So this is a real reality for our kids right now.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. I'm just doing a last scan to see if anyone had a hand up that they wanted to ask a question. I don't see that. So Dr. Bedell, I believe that we are prepared to go on to the regular business items.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. And if we can pull that slide up, let's get into it. We have about 5 items that we need the board to take action on, and then board will go into consent items. Cornerstones of care. We're asking the board to take action on the approval of the Second Amendment to the service agreement with Cornerstones of Care. This agreement is capped at $700,000 for the 2021 school year. Cornerstones of Care is a state-approved private agency that has provided service for KCPS exceptional education students for many years.
Are there any questions about this item from my colleagues? Okay, hearing none, it would be in order to receive a motion to approve the agreement with Cornerstones of Care in the amount of $700,000.
So moved.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll, please.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom, Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Thank you. Next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is the CBIZ extension renewal agreement in the amount of $318,580. The administration is requesting a renewal of this agreement with CBIZ Benefits and Insurance Services for consulting and providing supports for employee benefits for the Kansas City Public School District.
Are there any questions on this item? Seeing none, it would be in order to receive a motion for approval of the agreement with CBIZ Insurance Services in the amount of $318,580.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Thank you. There's a majority in favor and the CBIZ agreement is approved. The next item.
Madam Chair, the administration is asking the board to take action on Sun Life Assurance self-insured stop loss application in the amount of $2,111,436. This is for the approval of the application for self-insured medical stop loss coverage for claims over $100,000. The annual premium will be paid from the Employee Benefits Fund as a portion of the monthly premium assessed for employee independent coverages.
Are there any questions on this item? Seeing no questions, it would be in order to receive a motion to approve the Sun Life Assurance self-insured stop loss application in the amount of $2,111,436.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Thank you. The agreement with Sun Life Assurance is approved. The next item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next item is the administration is asking the board to take action on Early Head Start direct service, our provider contract for $333,885. This is for the approval of the renewal for Early Head Start services, infant and toddler program through August. That's not correct. August of 2021 or 2022, the 2021 school year. The contract amount is $333,885. Funds will be allocated to the Early Head Start Federal Expansion Program.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. Are there any questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, it would be in order to receive a motion for renewal of the Early Head Start Direct Service Provider Agreement in the amount of $333,885.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey,
Yes.
Thank you. The Early Head Start Service Provider Agreement is approved. The next item, Dr. Bedell.
Madam Chair, the final item that we're asking the board to take action on today is the Head Start Direct Service Provider Agreement in the amount of $4,984,901. We are asking the board to approve this contract of the Direct Service Provider Agreement between Mid-America Regional Council and Kansas City Public Schools for Head Start services. Funds will be allocated to the Head Start federal grant.
Are there any questions about this item? Okay, hearing none, it would be in order to receive a motion to approve the Head Start Direct Service Provider Agreement renewal.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on this motion? Seeing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Vancer,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. The Head Start Direct Service Provider Agreement is approved. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent items 1 through 18. So it would be in order to receive a motion to approve the consent items.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the consent items? Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Vancer,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent agenda is approved. Dr. Bedell, do you have any additional items for this evening?
No, Madam Chair.
All right. So with that, that concludes the meeting for today. The board's next meeting will be held on December 9th, 2020. So we will see you then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all and good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.